Well, I have decided that we're going to do another whole novel before January, and that novel is going to be The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. I have not read this book in close to 20 years. I'm really, really looking forward to reading it for you. I am going to try and get the voices as close to the voices in the Disney film as I can, except for the Wart, because his voice sucks. Much better. That voice is much better suited to the pig in Charlotte's Web than it is to King Arthur. So his voice will sound sort of like Parzival's voice in the last book did. I hope that you enjoy it, and let's get started. The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. I pray you all, gentlemen and gentlewomen, that readeth this book, from the beginning to the ending, pray for me, while I am on live, that God send me good deliverance, and when I am dead, I pray you all pray for my soul. Sir Thomas Malory Knight, July 31st, 1485. And now it is all gone, like an insubstantial pageant faded, and between us and the Old English there lies a gulf of mystery which the prose of the historian will never adequately bridge. They cannot come to us, and our imaginations can but feebly penetrate to them. Only among the aisles of the cathedral, only as we gaze upon their silent figures sleeping in their tombs, some faint conceptions float before us of what these men were when they were alive. Chapter 1. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it was Count Hand and Sumulae Logicalis, while the rest of the week it was Organon, repetition, and astrology. The governess was always getting muddled with her astrolabe, and when she got specially muddled, she would take it out of the Wart by rapping his knuckles. She did not rap Kay's knuckles, because when Kay grew older, he would be Sir Kay and the master of the estate. The Wart was called the Wart because it rhymed with art, which was short for his real name. Kay had given him the nickname. Kay was not called anything but Kay, because he was too dignified to have a nickname, and would have flown into a passion if anybody had tried to give him one. The governess had red hair and some mysterious wound from which she derived a lot of prestige by showing it to all the women of the castle behind closed doors. It was believed to be where she sat down, and to have been caused by sitting on a broken bottle at a picnic by mistake. Eventually she offered to show it to Sir Ector, who was Kay's father, had hysterics, and was sent away. They found out afterwards that she had been in a lunatic hospital for 3 years. In the afternoon, the program was Mondays and Fridays, tilting and horsemanship, Tuesdays hawking, Wednesdays fencing, Thursdays archery, Saturdays the theory of chivalry, with the proper measures to be blown on all occasions, terminology of the chase and hunting etiquette. If you did the wrong thing at the mort, or the undoing, for instance, you were bent over the body of the dead beast and smacked with the flat side of a sword. This was called being bladed. It was horseplay, a sort of joke, like being shaved when crossing the line. Kay was not bladed, although he often went wrong. After they had got rid of the governess, Sir Ector said, "After all, damn it all, we can't have the boys running about all day like hooligans. After all, can we, damn it all? Ought to be having a first-rate education at their age. When I was their age, I was doing all this Latin and stuff at 5 o'clock every morning. Happiest time of my life. Pass the port." Sir Grummore Grummersome, who was staying the night because he had been benighted out questing after a special long run, said that when he was their age, he was swished every morning because he would go hawking instead of learning. He attributed to this weakness the fact that he never could get beyond the future simple of Utor. It was the third of the way down the left-hand page, he said. He thought it was page 97. He passed the port. Sir Ector said, "Had a good quest today?" Sir Grummer said. Not so bad. Rattling good day, in fact. Found a chap called Sir Bruce Sauce Pinty chopping off a maiden's head in weed and bushes. Ran him to Mixbury Plantation in a Bixtier, where he doubled back and lost him in Wicken Wood. Must have been a good 25 miles as he ran. A straight neck, then, said Sir Ector. But about these boys and all this Latin, added Sir Ector. Amo Amos, you know, and running around like hooligans. What would you advise? Ah, said Sir Grummer, laying a finger to his nose and winking at the port. That takes a deal of thinking about, if you don't mind my saying so. Don't mind at all, said Sir Ector. Very kind of you to say anything. Much obliged, I'm sure. Help yourself to port. Good port, this, said Sir Grummer. Get it from a friend of mine, said Sir Ector. But about these boys, said Sir Grummer. How many of them are there, do you know? 2, said Sir Ector. Counting them both, that is. Couldn't send them to Eton, I suppose, inquired Sir Grummer cautiously. Long way and all that, we know. Isn't so much the distance, said Sir Ector, but the giant what's-his-name is in the way. Have to pass through his country. Try you understand. What is his name? Can't recollect at the moment, not for the life of me. Fellow that lives by that Burnbury water. Ah, Gallowpass, said Sir Grummer. That's the very chap. The only other thing, said Sir Grummer, is to have a tutor. You mean a fellow who teaches you, said Sir Ector wisely. That's it, said Sir Grummer, a tutor, you know, a fellow who teaches you. Have some more port, said Sir Ector. You need it after all this questing. Splendid day, said Sir Grummer. Only they never seem to kill nowadays. Run 25 miles and then mark to ground or lose him altogether. The worst is when you start a fresh quest. We'll kill all our giants clubbing, said Sir Ector. After that, they give you a fine run, but get away. Run out of scent, said Sir Grummer. I dare say. It's always the same with these big giants in a big country. They run out of scent. But even if you were to have a tutor, said Sir Ector, I don't see how you would get him. Advertise, said Sir Grummer. I have advertised, said Sir Ector. I have put it in the Humberland News and the Cardinal Advisor. The only other way, said Sir Grummer, is to start a quest. You mean a quest for a tutor? Explained Sir Ector. That's it, said Sir Grummer. Hick, hack, hawk, said Sir Ector. Have some more port. Hunk, said Sir Grummer. So it was decided. When Sir Grummer Grummerson had gone away next day, Sir Ector tied a knot to his handkerchief to remember to start a quest for a tutor as soon as he had time. And, as he was not quite sure how to set about it, he told the boys what Sir Grummer had suggested and warned them not to be hooligans meanwhile. Then they went haymaking. It was July, and every able-bodied man and woman on the estate worked all that month in the field under Sir Ector's direction. In any case, the boys would have been excused from being educated just then. Sir Ector's castle stood in an enormous clearing in a still more enormous forest. It had a big green courtyard and a moat with pike in it. The moat was crossed by a strongly fortified stone bridge which ended halfway across it. The other half was covered by a wooden drawbridge which was wound up every night. As soon as you had crossed the drawbridge, you were at the top of the village street. It had only one street, and this extended for about half a mile, with little white thatched houses of mud on each side of it. The street divided the clearing into two huge fields, that on the left being cultivated in hundreds of long narrow strips, while that on the right ran down to a little river and was used as a pasture. Half of the right-hand field was fenced off for hay. It was July, and real July weather, such as they only had in old England. Everybody went bright brown like red Indians, with startling teeth and flashing eyes. The dogs moved about with their tongues hanging out, or lay panting in bits of shade, while the farm horses sweated through their coats and flicked their tails and tried to kick the horseflies off their bellies with their great hind hooves. In the pasture field, the cows were on the gad, and could be seen galloping about with their tails in the air, which made Sir Ector angry. Sir Ector stood on top of the rick whence he could see what everybody was doing and shouted commands all over the 200-acre field, and grew purple in the face. The best mowers moved away in a line where the grass was still uncut, their scythes roaring all together in the strong sunlight. The women racked the hay together in long lines with wooden rakes. The two boys with pitchforks followed on either side of the line, turning hay inward so that it lay well for picking up. Then the great carts followed, rumbling with their spiked wooden wheels, drawn by horses or slow white oxen. One man stood on top of the cart to receive the hay and direct operations, while one man walked on either side, picking up what the boys had prepared and throwing it to him with a fork. The cart was led down the lane between two lines of hay and was loaded in strict rotation from the front poles to the back, the man on top calling out in a stern voice where he wanted each fork to be pitched. The loaders grumbled at the boys for not having laid the hay properly and threatened to tan them when they caught them if they got left behind. When the wagon was loaded, it was drawn to Sir Ector's rick and pitched to him. It came up easily because it had been loaded systematically, not like modern hay, and Sir Ector scrambled about on top, getting in the way of his two assistants, who did all the real work, and stamping and perspiring and scratching about with his fork and trying to make the rick grow straight, and shouting that it would all fall down as soon as the west winds came. The wart loved haymaking and was good at it. Kay, who was 2 years older, generally stood on the edge of the bundle of hay which he was trying to pick up, with the result that he worked twice as hard as the wart with only half the result. But he hated to be beaten by anybody at anything, and used to fight away with the wretched hay, which he loathed like poison, until he was quite sick. The day after Sir Grumor's visit was hot, sweltering for the men who toiled from milking to milking, and then again till sunset in their battle with the sultry element. For the hay was an element to them like sea air, in which they bathed and plunged themselves, and which they even breathed in. The seeds and small scraps stuck to their hair, their mouths, their nostrils, and worked, tickling inside their clothes. They did not wear many clothes, and the shadows between their sliding muscles were blue on the nut-brown skins. Those who feared thunder had felt ill that morning. In the afternoon a terrible storm came. Sir Ector kept them at it till great flashes were right overhead, and then, with the sky as dark as night, the rain came hurtling against them, so that they were drenched at once and could not see 100 yards. The boys lay crouched under the wagons, wrapped in hay to keep their wet bodies warm against the now cold wind, and all joked with one another while heaven fell. Kay was shivering, though not with cold, but he joked like the others because he would not show he was afraid. At the last and greatest thunderbolt, every man startled involuntarily, and each saw the others startle, until they all laughed away their shame. But that was the end of the haymaking for them, and the beginning of play. The boys were sent home to change their clothes. The old dame who had been their nurse fetched dry jerkins out of a press, and scolded them for catching their deaths, and denounced Sir Ector for keeping on so long. Then they slipped their heads into their laundered shirts, and ran into the refreshed and sparkling court. And that is where we will pause.